Oh, hey. So a few weeks ago, I started this weekly series of talking about things I want to talk about, and started with talking about, well, cherishing when time goes by, when time flies. You know, often I'm not big about saying, oh yeah, time sure does fly by, but you know, that decade hit from summer 2014, and definitely got me to start reflecting upon things. And, you know, alongside that, I talked about how around that time, leading into that time, I learned to enjoy Mondays more. Not just Mondays, but weekdays in general. You know, we often are so tight-focused, tight-knit on getting to the weekend. And so being able to cherish each day, and not just the weekend or Thursday being pre-Friday, I think is super important. And one thing I think it's another line that is said a lot, and I think people dismiss because it's used a lot, is stop and smell the roses. And it's interesting to think about that because, you know, that's a pretty nice gesture, you know, especially if there are actual roses lying about. It's like, yeah, that'd be, you know, great unless you're like highly allergic. But even then, roses tend to be something that you can appreciate even from afar. So when you actually do think about stop and smell the roses, I often think about that. It's definitely, I think, one of the most used quotes from the show The Office, you know, when Andy Bernard talks about, I wish I knew I was in the good old days when I was in the good old days. And I'm actually glad I learned about that line so early in my life, because it allowed me to, while I was in college and while I was at my job, you know, I was able to cherish each day, because I was like, it's adding the foresight of knowing it's the good old days. You know, again, back to the first I Love Mondays I covered, is, you know, I talked about the importance of understanding, you know, what understanding the value each day could bring. And, you know, I talked about, you know, Pew Pew card and games, and how that was a spot where people would show up to play Street Fighter and Super Smash Brothers, Magic, Pokemon, you know, some Yu-Gi-Oh. You know, it was great. And so that was when I was there, you know, 10 years ago. I knew that was going to be its own good old days. And I'm glad I added that foresight. And I think it takes a little bit. I think it takes a little bit of, again, foresight and self-realization when you're at a party or you're at a get-together with friends, to say, wow, this is a very fortunate time I'm having. It almost clashes with enjoy the moment, but I don't think it completely does. There's definitely a way that you can apply both enjoy the moment, but also have a foresight of appreciation for what's happening right now. And that's not to be doom or gloom. I think sometimes people are worried about having that. I should appreciate what I have now, because they're worried about the next part, where some people say appreciate what you have before it's gone. I think it's important to be a realist about understanding that, you know, in terms of people, you know, we eventually pass away, you know, life itself, you know, the circle of life. But rather than be grim about it, there's so many other great opportunities after that, you know. So I'll have a party with my friends and we're, you know, playing Super Smash Brothers, Pokemon TCG. We're having a good time, we're laughing, and I'm thinking, yeah, this is an awesome time. I'm gonna remember this. You know, rather than me saying like, oh, this might not ever happen again, it's more about saying, this is great and I would love to do more of this. And I think that's helped a lot. It's interesting about, again, it circles back to cherishing each day. And I think when we get really into a routine of, you know, work, coming home, you know, eating dinner, getting ready for bed, it might be hard to stop and observe the roses. And I think the key word is observe here, not just smell the roses. Because when you observe the bouquet of roses, or roses, you know, growing out of the ground, the garden itself, you can really start to think about the work that was put into that. And I think that's just a good thing to have for appreciating life in general, is because then you start to really have a higher sense of, it actually dials it more into sympathy, and you actually start having more of a broader perspective on how things were created. So, I'll smell the roses and be like, wow, that's great. But when I observe the roses, I'm thinking about the gardener and what it took to create that, which in and of itself is like a work of art. And so I think by being able to stop and observe the roses, for example, when I brought up a parties I've had with friends where we play games, or like after parties. When I do a Pokemon Highlander tournament, sometimes we do after parties, and during these after parties, I will stop and observe the roses there, and it's me going, we're in a very fortunate situation where, a lot of these people have busy lives, and they took time off work in their lives to come together and play Pokemon, and then we're all enjoying each other's company right after. And I start thinking about how all these individual people have different busy lives, and I think that starts to place a priority in valuing each individual too, rather than just the situation. And obviously, you only have so much time in the day, but I actually think it's a good skill to develop, to just kind of quickly take a step back, observe the roses, appreciate them, and understand what kind of general accumulation happened to appreciate this situation, which it makes me realize even more how much my friends do care about me and their other our other friends in general. And that's just with a lot of situations. I think observation just helps out a lot. Observation goes hand in hand with art. So you can smell the roses, and then as you appreciate that form of art, that nature's beauty, you can also observe what accumulated to make that piece of art. And a lot of artists, they value perspective overall, and I think that's important, like, to improve upon yourself as an artist. And in this case, you're just going on with your own canvas of life, and so to hear other people share their perspectives, I think can help you live your life. For me to be able to see people happy, and for people to, for example, with my Pokemon tournaments, when I see people having fun and playing cards, and then I understand again that these people took time off to play this game, and they tell me that they enjoyed it a lot, and they're enjoying the time there and at these after parties. It's good to know. It helps my perspective, broaden my perspective on what each individual is bringing here, and that also includes kind of what decks these players are doing. It's cool to see kind of personalities invoked into what they bring. In this case, the Rose Garden is the tournament, and all these different roses are different colors, and it's cool to kind of backtrack and see why certain people like certain deck play styles, whether it's a spreading damage deck or a mill deck. Like it's great to kind of track, and you can kind of track, and then you can also be like, oh, this person's been working really hard for this strategy. Just like the Rose Garden, I think when you actually observe it, and you can be like, wow, that person worked really hard, towards that, this garden, and that's just for life in general. There's just so many things to appreciate, and I think that kind of comes back to being appreciative of what we have. I think we're caught in such a world of negativity all the time. It's so easy to focus on the negative. I think it's an easy default for people to just blame things, and they try to latch their unhappiness onto others. But on the polar opposite side is when you're content with, you're okay. You're like, hey, I have a roof over my head. I have water, running water on demand. I have a car that can take me places, or I have people that can help out with taking me places if I need that. We live in a time where food is clean overall. You think about the Middle Ages, and they had to worry about, even with cooking, they still had to worry about getting sick and dying at an early age, which is really sad. So we really do live in a time where there's so many things that I think people do take for granted. And so when you do take a step back and observe just these necessities in life, these great things that are given to us, I do think the rose garden becomes more clear in how beautiful it really is. And it's great that you can experience that with, other friends and family. And, we have the holiday season approaching. And so you might not see as many rose gardens now. But there's, their own forms of rose gardens. A nice, cool snowman with a pipe sticking out, and you're just like, wow, someone put work into that. That's its own form of artwork. It's got the nice top hat. Dang. Okay, doing a little shopping. There you go. So it's fun. It's fun living a life where you not just stop and smell the roses, but observe the garden, observe what's around it, and start to really think about the work and drive that that might have been put in there. Some type of work was put in there, that's for sure. So it's interesting to think about and really appreciate that there could have been a lot of positivity put into that. And that goes for a lot of things. The last thing I'll mention is, speaking of 10 years, it is approaching. In 2015, when I went to the University of Missouri, the first week of school, I emailed quite a few of my past professors at Metropolitan Community College. And I'm not sharing this because it's like, oh, I did it out of the ambition of doing a good deed, which, obviously would erase its integrity if I'm, just boasting about this. But what I want to talk about is something that I didn't expect. So I emailed a bunch of my old professors, and I just told them distinctly each, like, what they taught me and what I got out of it and what I bring that to life now. So one example is at MCC, Professor Preisendorf taught historical geology. I don't know if he still does, though, but that would be great if he's still teaching. He's a great teacher. And I emailed him, and my distinct email for him, I emailed him and a few other teachers, but for the example here, I told him about how, even though I'm majoring in audio engineering, and at the time it was going for music composition, I told him that taking his historical geology class broadened my perspective on just appreciating what's around me more. In this case, I would drive around Kansas City, and after I took his class, all these beautiful bedrock formations you'd see while driving on the road, you now understand that is millions of years of work, like the sediment beds. And he taught about how, when rock layers look a bit different stacked on top of each other, that is millions of years of, nature's art. That is nature painting a giant canvas that takes millions and millions of years of work. And him educating me enlightened my perspective. That is my rose garden that I can now stop and observe. Obviously, you're on the road, but a quick glance, then you think about, wow, like, there's a lot of work that was put into that, and it just looks great. He taught me about all these things that, again, we do take for granted, like the ground below us, and how much good fertile soil can help with growing, well, ironically, a beautiful rose garden. And I basically was just telling him that he helped me with gaining a bigger perspective about the things around me each day. And he told me that what I told him is the exact reason why he teaches, which that threw me off. I just wanted to kind of give some words of appreciation, but he told me that this type of email was the exact kind of big drive as to why he was kind of talking about why other teachers teach in general. And it makes you realize that, right now in the United States, there is an issue with education of teachers being underpaid. So think about teachers being underpaid, and then teachers having to deal with students that might be misbehaving a lot. And, that can really double down in the challenge. But then on the opposite end, if more students were able to widen their perspective and appreciation for how much work teachers put in general, I think it would make them honestly probably appreciate every class period more. I think in general, by having that understanding of how much work goes into, especially, obviously, teachers are different. There are some teachers that might not be as driven to actually educate. But in his case, and a lot of my teachers, like most, I think for the most part, most of my college professors had that type of ambition to, like, they wanted people to be educated. They wanted perspective to be broadened because, especially at community college where the priority is get a associate's degree / general education, it is just a very well-rounded range of education. And so there's a lot of these teachers from different backgrounds. Like I said, I went in for audio engineering, but I still had to take math, science, history, English, and I'm glad I did. It just, I love that line about, general education allows you to have competent conversation with basically any professional at a party. I love that so much because it's pretty on the line. Yeah, that the big thing about these teachers is they want to help you become more competent, whether you don't have critical thinking at the time and they want to invoke that, or you further hone your critical thinking skills. And that this all comes back to stop and observe the roses, and by observing you also are appreciating. So it's great. Live each day, appreciate each day, pat yourself on the back for getting out of bed each day, and keep at it in life. So I love Mondays.